This operational optimization, and yes, it is a little bit of mouthful, but what we really mean here is creating a sustainable business. So scaling modern streaming services while maintaining positive unit economics. We understand that in the short term, a lot of operators are now trying to buy audiences, and so it may not be profitable from a pure P&L perspective. However, it is still crucial at these stages that the unit economics and the per viewer math works out correctly, because the last thing that we want our customers in the industry doing is building an unsustainable business where it costs too much to actually service the viewers in order to have a successful launch. So there's other things we put under this umbrella, a lot of things under mitigating risk. So content protection for SVOD, meeting viewer demands while maximizing revenue for AVOD. And so I'll get into a little bit more about what that means in a moment. And then the umbrella for all of this is we want to mitigate the risk of failure. These are really high value assets that we're creating and distributing. And at the end of the day, it is now the streaming workflow that will be taking the majority of viewership. And we need to make sure that those systems are robust and will be able to serve the business needs of these large organizations. So with that, Katty, how's the weather out there?
Hi, Kieran. So it's actually looking extra challenging out here when it comes to operational optimization. While everyone focuses on who's going to win the streaming wars, there might be services that will not come out on top. One of the early casualties is actually Sony's PlayStation Vue, which ends its services tomorrow. The announcement came even though Sony repeatedly raised the price of Vue to try to offset its rising costs. So operational optimization means keeping costs in check and covering them with the money the business generates while achieving healthy margins. And let's look at the main monetization models and what set of operational challenges they each come with. Subscription and ad-based models are the leading ones, and that was also confirmed by our developer survey. For subscription-based models, the dominant players, Netflix, Amazon, Prime, Disney Plus, are already pushing people's spending limits. The average American video streaming subscriber today uses and pays for 3.4 services. That's around $29 per month. And that is less than a third of the average monthly cable bill, which is around $107. There are plenty of service right now going around that try to feel out what the consumers are willing to spend. And one of the latest ones we've seen was they're willing to spend up to another $11. That's 50% more. But again, still way under a monthly cable bill. And so while the subscription-based services are still preferred by consumers, one of the competitive advantages here is, or one of the deciding factors is actually the content. So this kind of content is premium. They need to protect it. And the more surprised we were when we learned from our developer survey that only 40% of the participants are even protecting their content and using DRM. And with more services entering the market, each with their unique content library, piracy will be on the rise again. Fans often don't want to watch streaming service all of the content they have. They would like to pick and choose and just want to watch certain shows. Another issue which we feel needs to be mentioned here, because it costs streaming services millions of dollars, is password sharing. A coalition that includes Netflix and HBO is stepping up their efforts to crack down on password sharing, but no new measures have been implemented yet. So if you don't want to pay more for streaming services than the services you already have, and you're keeping it legal, then you hopefully enjoy watching ads before getting to your content. I'm coming from the edtech world, and I know firsthand that ads are being disliked for various reasons. The data about the usage of ad blockers that you see here just underlines how viewers around the world are trying to get around ads. So personal preferences aside, if the technical issues behind the viewer complaints can be resolved and a smoother and better experience for the viewer can be achieved, the AVOD model will see further adoption in the future.
Thanks, Katty. Sounds like some stormy weather indeed. Back here in the studio, let's summarize what those trends are. So unit economics need to work at least someday. So we need to make sure that on a per viewer basis, it's a reasonable economic model and that our cost structure supports this. And we need to make money, and we need to do so without upsetting our viewers. Therefore, if we look at those requirements, we need to reduce the delivery costs while still increasing quality, which seems like almost an impossible task, and Chris will let us know if we can do that. We need effective but not obtrusive content protection. We need to have smooth advertising experiences that still generate moolah. And we always need to make sure we're preventing disaster. So this sounds like a lot. Is this even possible to do, Chris?
Yeah, it's not easy, I would say, and we know this by heart, I have to say. We see now a lot of companies, and we went through the same phases more or less, really in the scaling phase. And usually in the scaling phase, you somehow scale at any cost, and you don't take efficiency so much into account. You know, you have a certain business model, you know, your unique economics will work at a certain stage, and you're just scaling, you're just trying to get market share. That's a good thing. And I think the problems that currently a lot of companies are facing are also good problems. So for example, costs for delivery are exploding. That's a nice problem to have because it means somebody is actually using your service, or a lot of people are using your service. And I think we see a lot of companies currently getting into this efficiency phase. So quality is an important factor, but without operational optimization, it's not possible to deliver a superior experience, as budgets are not endless. What do we mean with that is basically that even if these companies are scaling at any cost right now, still they have restricted budgets. And now they are getting into the phase where they say, how do I spend this budget more wisely, basically? We have customers that, for example, by just using per title encoding and 3-pass encoding, saved 80% on the storage side and 80% on the CDN distribution side. But this doesn't mean that they saved all of those, basically, all of those dollars. They basically reinvested a lot of these dollars to acquire more customers, to get to new markets, for example. So basically, their storage costs somehow stayed the same, and their CDN costs also stayed the same, but they can actually now reach like more than double the customers that they reached before with the same budget. So that's the phase where I think we are currently in, or where a lot of companies are currently getting to. And as I said, it's a nice problem to have, and we know it also by heart. As a company, as Bitmovie, we also went through these phases, and I think that's just normal if you are successful. We think that in 2020 we will see much more of these advanced technologies. Also, some of these things what Netflix basically is doing because of their sheer scale, like per title encoding, for example, or multi-codecs, or using multiple codecs. All these things that make it hard on an operational side, but also the things that make you more efficient and help you also on the quality of experience side. I think we will see more 3-pass encoding, for example, to improve the individual bit rates. We will see, as Kati already mentioned, the ad experiences are not really good. We are not even on par with what we see currently on the linear or broadcast channel. So I think we see more SSAI, for example, so server-side ad insertion in 2020. We will see more things on the player side when it comes to operational efficiency, really adaptation logics that are tailored for certain regions, but also tailored probably for the individual users and adapted on a continuous basis to deliver the experience which is best for the user. So we still see companies, and that's good because they're successful. So delivering, for example, 4K video, the same adaptation logic to a mobile device with a 10-inch screen, where you can probably not see even the difference between a 720 bitrate and the 1080 bitrate. So it's somehow wasting bandwidth, and also bandwidth in general area, and also computational power on these devices. And we think 2020 will be the year where companies will get much better. Also, for example, on the CMOS side, so we think that CMOS segments for HLS and Dash will get more popular. So you don't probably have to store now 2 separate sets, one for HLS and one for Dash, which basically doubles your storage. We think companies will tap into the direction of just storing a single set and referencing it with HLS and Dash, and this will overall make us more efficient. So I think that would be a good start for 2020. Another thing what we have in mind, but not for, I think 2020 will be the start, but it's more for the years beyond. What we see is like something like a common video infrastructure layer starts to develop. Currently, there's a lot of fragmentation and do-it-yourself in the media market. that reminds me a little bit of the network market of the 80s. For example, in the 80s, everybody was more or less building his own router, his own switches, his own networks. If you now talk with companies, Fortune 500 companies, basically nobody is doing that, except probably the really, really big ones like Amazon and Google that have their own data centers, but even those in the offices are buying this hardware from one of the top vendors of the network market. That could be a Cisco, it could be Netgear, and others that are dominating that market. That was a natural revolution, basically, or evolution that was going on in the 80s, because this was the only way how the market could make the next step. I mean, you only have so many resources as an economy that you need to spend wisely. So this was just the next step to get more efficient. We think currently that's the beginning in the media market. We see what, for example, TCP/IP was for the media or for the network market will be API-based services for the video markets. Companies will probably focus more on their core competencies, which will make them more efficient and effective in the end. So they will basically buy building blocks from one of the top vendors of this infrastructure, video infrastructure layer, and they build their value-added services on top and really focus on what they do well, like they currently do also with networks, for example. Will be a start of this common, how we say, video infrastructure layer with building blocks that many companies provide. These building blocks, from our perspective, will have interfaces to work with each other. So like in the network market, for example, you could buy a router from Cisco, but you could connect it with a switch from Netgear, for example. You see the same thing will happen or starts to happen currently in the media market. And I think 2020 is the beginning of this. We'll see more API-based services, not because we also have API-based services. And currently, I just think that's the future. This is how Amazon operates now since decades, for example, services-based architectures, how other companies operate very successfully since a long time. I think these API-based services, as I said, this will be the TCP/IP basically of the video infrastructure market. We don't have the defined interfaces yet, but I think this will come. It will start in 2020, and in the years out, this will get. We will see this more and more. Same on the player side, for example. Currently, basically each of the devices has a different API, and it's very hard to deploy on those. The time to market increases obviously here too, but also from an operational efficiency standpoint, that's really hard. We see that there will be unified player APIs provided by several companies, probably also building blocks that interact with each other, that help these companies to provide an infrastructure layer for all of these devices where they can build up on all. And that will eventually and hopefully make us as an industry more effective. 2020 will be the year where we see the beginnings of a common infrastructure layer for video that will ultimately make the whole industry more efficient. Kati talked to this a little bit, advertising. I think we are not there yet. I think 2020 is more or less the start, next evolution of advertising. Video advertising on OTT, from our perspective, is still in its infancy, and we are just scratching the surface in terms of possibilities to serve ads in a better and richer way. What we mean with that is basically currently we try to match the experience more or less that we have on the broadcast channel, and sometimes we're not even able to do this. So currently, if you see this, you as a user of the internet, you probably also see this on several services. You see ad failures. Sometimes the ad is not starting, or the ad is starting and afterwards the video is not working, which is even worse. You see sometimes long startup delays. So you have to wait a very long time, probably in between a video for a mid-roll ad to start, and afterwards to go back to the video, which is just not a good experience. We see sometimes badly designed ad experiences that have been designed for the linear channel and just ported to the OTT channel. We think there's so much more possible. So actually thinking beyond this, currently we're trying to match what linear broadcast TV delivers, but actually with all the data that we have, with all the programmatic elements that we have, and with programmatic, I don't only mean programmatic ads, I mean, all what we have is software, basically. It's adaptable. We can really adapt a whole website, the whole experience for the user. We can define a whole new ad experience. And I think this is something what we will see starting in 2020 and in the years beyond. So really taking into account more or less the current mood of the consumer or the customer of your platforms, because we know exactly on which shows he watched beforehand, on which buttons he clicked, when he stopped, when he fall asleep, everything basically. And we can really tailor the experience in a really great way and deliver something that is different than the ad experience that we currently have on linear broadcast. In general, I think 2020, as said, will still be the year we try to match what we currently have on broadcast. So we see more and more server-side ad insertion to just get a better user experience. But ultimately, at the end, I think, and beyond, we will see advertising really change in 2020 and beyond. And we will see better ad experiences and better designed ads for OTT. One of the most important things, I think I mentioned that now quite a few times already, but especially here when it comes to operational efficiency, I think it's crucial. There's no way how you can improve when you're not measuring. And we know this also as a company. If you don't have the metrics in place, if you don't have the analytics in place, you actually know somehow something is not going right, but you know exactly what to change. And even worse, if you change something and you don't even know what impact it has and why it had that impact, for example, so it's really hard to run experiments on a quickly basis. So before we can even start to work on efficiency, we need to identify the inefficient parts. So we see a lot of companies currently using an analytics solution, but not many can really make effective use of the data. So really produce actionable insights out of the data that we have. Usually we also see that just parts of the workflow are tracked, and also the metrics that are used are not correlated across systems. So typically we see analytics solution in place on the client side somehow, but not really correlated with the CDN or merged together with the CDN data or the encoding data. And you always have this partial view of the system, and you really cannot take insight or really insights out of it. Or even worse, sometimes companies have all that data, but they don't take action of this data, or they don't have any means to take action of this data, or cannot really analyze this data. So we think actually 2020 we will see more metrics that are in use, metrics that make more sense for these companies because they had now more time to experiment basically. And typically systems we currently don't work in real time, and we will see more systems in real time from our perspective. This is really crucial because the faster you can run an experiment, the faster you can basically get to result, good or bad, and improve from this result. So in general, we think in 2020, we will see more companies starting to make use of this data and integrating it into their day-to-day workflows to improve on a continuous basis.